My name is Daryl Wisdahl. I'm a senior regulatory affairs consultant. For me, regulatory expertise is knowing a couple things. One is knowing what the regulations are, knowing that the regulations change all the time. So don't rest on your laurels. Always be prepared to go look up something if you have any questions about it. And so that's one of the things I've learned in the 30 odd years working in this industry is that part of your expertise as a regulatory person is knowing what you do know and what you don't know, and never being afraid to say, hey, this is what I understand it to be right now, but before I move forward, let's take a look and see that the regulations haven't been updated. And that also holds with quality management systems as well. So when you're looking at the ISO 1345 or similar standards, again, those don't change as much as regulations can, but still looking to see if there's any new interpretations of how those standards are being implemented or how notified bodies and auditing organizations are considering them these days. For me, regulatory expertise is having the background, having the knowledge, but also having the ability to say, hey, I don't know everything, and be prepared to do a little bit of research to make sure that you know the right answer, and more importantly, the customer or a client that you're working with is going to get the right information. In the time I've been doing this job, I think one of the other pieces that's about regulatory expertise is getting a broad knowledge of the regulations, so and types of devices that you work with. It's great if you have a lot of knowledge on one type of device. It's outstanding if you have a lot of knowledge on, say, cardiovascular devices. But for me, my regulatory expertise is knowing enough about each different type of devices or a lot of different devices so that I can be prepared to work with a customer who is not just manufacturing cardiovascular devices or not just manufacturing neurological devices, but working in other areas. I think where I have a notch above some others is that I've been there on the ground. I've been in industry. Before I got into consulting, I worked at 3 startup companies. My first company I worked with right out of university, we were doing a multi-center clinical trial. So I jumped in and helped manage a clinical trial right after university. And I then went on and wrote the pre-market approval application for the FDA, and we were one of the first FDA PMAs issued to a company from Canada. In fact, we got it done in 9 months when the average at that time was about 18 months to get a PMA done. And I think that initial start for me was kind of gave me some understanding of the challenges with regulations. In fact, right after that first job, we had our next 2 510Ks denied because of substantial equivalence questions. And so also got to be humble right away. I also got the opportunity to, as one of my old bosses said, carry a bag. That means I went out and acted as a sales rep and a product manager for one of the products I worked on, that first company I worked with. So I got to go sit in front of the customer, the patient, and understand a little bit more about what their needs were. So when I came back into regulatory and into quality, I had a better understanding of why are the regulations there? What are the issues that the people I work with? So in industry, those were the sales and marketing people. Why are they always pushing really hard to get things through regulatory as quick as possible? And how can I talk to them about how regulations do impact them? How can I talk to them about how the pathway to a new market is convoluted? It's not always a straight line. So I think that early work for me helped me understand and frame my ability to talk to other people. So talk to other regulatory people, talk to other people in small or medium-sized medical device companies who aren't necessarily regulatory experts, but are, say, sales and marketing people. Because I've worked with sales and marketing people, because I've been a sales and marketing person, it gave me the opportunity to be able to speak to these people, these individuals who haven't been in regulatory in the same language as them. I can talk to them like a sales and marketing person, while at the same time bringing the regulatory knowledge, bringing the quality knowledge to the conversation. I think the other part of where I excel is really getting down to earth with the people I'm working with, bringing real life examples into the discussion. Don't just rest on the laurels of the regulation. Don't just rest on your experience on, this is what the FDA says to do. This is why you do it the PMA. This is why you do a CE mark. But giving them some real life experience from me and saying, hey, this is what I've seen working with this, whether that was in industry, whether that was as a consultant, and providing them something that they can see as tangible. So not only do I have to follow regulation A, B, C, and D, but why do I have to follow regulation A, B, C, and D? Because I can back that up with the years of experience I've had in working with different companies. And being a consultant now for 20 years, I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of companies to get them through different regulatory and quality hurdles because of my experience, because of the fact that I am able to talk to them as a peer and not just as that regulatory consultant. Depending on the project I'm working on, so it varies. But one of the things I look at is when we've got a company who's going to go to, say, for example, Europe, and this is their first foray into the European market. One of the things I work with them to understand is what are the regulations? What do they need to do? And then how can they actually do those things they're supposed to be doing? So not only tell them what they have to do, but help them along the way so that when they get a challenge or a question around the compliance requirements of, for example, creating a technical documentation file or the general safety and performance requirements, I can help them not only prepare those documents, but understand what goes into those documents and how they can then work on those and update those after I go away and our project is completed. So my intention is to be able to put them in a position where they're able to move forward doing the projects, if they so choose to do it that way, in a way that they're going to maintain the compliance. So they know not only why are we doing it today, but what do we have to do in the future? And that holds with quality projects as well. So if we help a company doing an internal audit and they finish the audit and we come up with some findings in the audit, my objective at the end of that project, that end of that audit cycle, is to be able to go back to them and say, hey, here's where your findings are. Here's how you can work on correcting those findings. And here's how you can address them so that they don't come back again in the future. So that when you have a future audit, whether it's an internal audit or an ISO audit or a customer audit or whatever that may be, you're in a position where you can address those issues and ensure you're still compliant with the regulation or the standards. One of the biggest challenges I see, especially when we're dealing with a company that's transitioning from one set of rules to another set of rules, and the perfect example right now that we're seeing, we've been seeing for the last 8 years, is the transition from the medical device directive to the medical device regulation, and the in vitro diagnostics directive to the in vitro diagnostics regulation. So what we've clearly seen as a problem has been companies saying, well, we've done it this way all along, and we've never had any issues before. Why do I have to change the way I'm doing it? And it's not that they're trying to be, trying to obfuscate away from their requirements. It's not that they're trying to say, hey, I don't want to do these things. Far from it. It's more, they need to understand the why they're doing it and the benefit of what they're doing. So the transition from the medical device directive to the medical device regulation, understanding, hey, here are the things that are different today compared to what they were before. And that also sometimes means, hey, I know that an auditor has come to your facility in the past and said everything was good. But because of this regulation change, the way you're doing things today may not stand up to the audit tomorrow, and you need to be prepared for that. And that's one of the challenges I often find. And again, it's not the intention of the company to not follow the rules. It's just we've done it the same way every single time before. Why do we have to change the way we're doing it going forward? Another struggle I see sometimes with a company trying to become regulatory compliant is that the people who are in the position to deal with the regulatory requirements and the quality requirements, they don't have the background. And it's, again, not a fault on theirs. They're a small company. And so they're trying to move forward with something they just don't understand. And you asking them something, it's like having a child and asking them to do something, and then if they don't do it, ask them the same way again. If they don't get it on the fourth time of asking the same thing, maybe you need to ask the question differently. And that's the same with working with companies who are new to this or are very small and they don't have the experience. If you ask them for something and they don't understand what you're asking for, you need to be prepared to talk about what they really need. And one of the challenges that a lot of these startup companies have, or early stage companies have, is that they just don't have that knowledge. They hear FDA and think of some of the regulations, but they don't understand some of the aspects that they need to deal with. And again, that's not their fault. They're a startup company. They're new to this. They just don't have the experience. So when it comes to getting regulatory compliance, it's trying to get past that knowledge level and saying, hey, this is what you need to work on getting done. And it comes back again to experience, knowing when you're talking to that customer what their limitations are based on their experience. And that becomes one of the biggest challenges I find with working with startup companies and small and medium-sized companies even, is that the people that are doing the job in regulatory have often inherited it because, or given that responsibility by the CEO, because they're the only person available and they have no experience. And so our job is helping them overcome that hurdle and helping them become knowledgeable. One of the most important things is the customer needs to understand what their device's intended purpose is. So they need to be able to describe exactly what that device is intended to do. What's the population that it's going to be used by? So is it a device that's going to be used for detecting cancer, or is it a device going to be detecting early stage pregnancy, or is it a device to treat a heart murmur? Whatever the case may be, they need to understand that intended purpose. And sometimes that is a challenge because try to get it down in words. I also really think it's important to find out, hey, what other devices are in the market that are like yours? Are you very unique? Are you brand new? The most unique product out there? Or is this something that's been around before and you are a new generation of a Me Too device? So, these blood pressure monitors have been around for a long time, but I've created a newer version of it. And here's some of the companies that are similar to my product, but mine is different because of X. I think that's really important. Also, understanding what goes into your device. So know the device, know your device inside and out, have all those schematics, have everything in place so that when we come in and start talking about the device, you can explain to us what you have for a device. Tell me about what testing you've already done. Have you done any testing? Have you done any clinical testing? Have you done lab testing? Have you sent it off to a third party to get testing on biocompatibility? That's a really important part of it. If you have an instructions to use or an operator manual or any kind of product labeling, you need to have that ready. If you've got a draft of it, again, that'll help us understand your product. So when we take on a project with you, we have an understanding what your product is by in your instructions to use manual. Also, have you sold the product in other markets? And if so, which markets? How long have you been doing it? What is the classification, or what was the pathway that you got to go into that market? Was it classified as a medical device in Canada? And if so, what regulatory classification was it? What license have you got for it? Is it a CE mark device? If you can start with those basic pieces, I think you will set yourself up for success when it comes to working with a consultant, because those are usually the base questions we start with. We need to know what your device is. We need to understand what the intended purpose is. It's very challenging because sometimes customers will come to us and say, well, what is our intended purpose? And we have to turn around and say, well, I'm not an expert of your ABC product. So what is that ABC product supposed to be used for? Who's going to be using that product? Is it going to be used by physicians? Is it going to be used by lay users? If it's going to be used by a lay user, how are they going to get access to that product? Are they buying it in their pharmacy? Are they getting it from their doctor? Are they buying it from Amazon? Understanding your customer is such a critical part, and understanding what they're going to use your product for is absolutely imperative when we start working together. When you start asking for information, you often end up talking to the person who either invented the device or was involved in the design of the device. So you get to hear a lot more about the history of the product than you might in the situation with working with a larger company who say, can you do this project for us? And they hand you the documentation and you just do the project. When you're working with a small or medium company, you have to roll up your sleeves. You often wear lots of hats working with them. You get to see what they've done and what they haven't done, and you can impart some guidance on them, some steps that they can do to improve the documentation they have right now. Or if you're doing a quality project, you can improve their quality system, which could lead to improved product in the future. And I think my other favorite part of it is, and it's those customers that you go back to and work with, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, is seeing the progression they've made as a company. Maybe because of what you've done, maybe not because of what you've done, but the progression they've made. And you can see how they've become more confident with their product and confident in what they're doing over that time. And you see that much more in small companies than even medium companies, and definitely more than in large companies, where that the transition from one product to a second product, or one product in one market to the same product in 3 or 4 other markets. When you're working with these small companies, you get to feel a little bit of their excitement, get to feel a little bit more of their success. That honestly is one of the things that drives me as a consultant, is to actually work with these companies. As I said, my beginnings was working in a small company. I worked at 3 startups, and you wore many hats, and you can see that when you're working with these companies, the hats they're wearing, and you can see that you're going to be wearing different hats. Sometimes you're their counselor. Why can't I go to this market? Well, I sometimes have to tell them, you can go to this market. However, it's going to take you 18 months. Can you do that? Can you wait 18 months for this? Or should you be looking at other markets? And you see that much more with small companies and medium-sized companies than you would with a large company.